Hopefully you've had a chance to listen to the other videos preceding this one. This brings us to the fourth part of the book. It's what I called taking our eye off the ball, and it's kind of a topical, probably politically incorrect, in fact all politically incorrect, and the portion I'm about to talk about is what I consider to be the most important part of the book. Up to this point, I've referred to people like Clausewitz, Julian Stafford Corbett, and borrowed from their writings, and also from the War Powers Resolution of 1973. At this point, I'm going to provide some original work that I've learned no one else has. And that has to do with my curiosity and how are we doing with the all-volunteer force. I enlisted in the Navy in 1970, and at that time we still had a draft. It wasn't until a year or so later that we had evolved into a lottery type draft because of the widespread feeling that and in fact truth, that the draft was unfair and unjust. So they attempted to make some fixes with a lottery system based on birthdays and needs, and that would determine who would get drafted. And then eventually they abandoned the draft altogether and went to the all-volunteer force. I served my early career in the transitional period from draft, where there are still a number of people that were drafted into the service that were serving, and as they completed, it evolved into an all-volunteer force. I'm sure you've heard, as I have over the last decade or so, that the all-volunteer force that we have is the finest military, most powerful military that man has ever known. And I was interested in finding, okay, is that really true? Because from my perspective as a veteran, and as having lived through this transition, and as a father and father-in-law of active duty service members right now, I don't really believe that's true. I think we're better than anyone else, but I don't think we're the best, and I don't think we're nearly as good as we could be or should be. Anyway, I was trying to figure out, okay, how do I get my arms around this? How do I study it? And at the time, this was around 2006 when I was collecting information for the college course I was teaching at East Carolina, and reading literature and reading the news every day. And one thing that struck me was Congressman Charles Rangel of New York, who had proposed and has proposed on several occasions a return to the draft, stating as its purpose to make our military fair, because he contends that we're disproportionate in our service in the military, that we have too many minorities serving, poor minorities serving instead of cross-section of the wealthy kids. Another book came out at the time, which I borrowed from and enjoyed reading, called AWOL, The Unexcused Absence of America's Upper Classes from Military Service and How It's Hurt Our Nation. And that's by Kathy Roth Duquette and Frank Schaefer. I liked it because Kathy Roth Duquette worked in the Clinton White House during the 1990s, and then she married a Marine. And so I figured she was going to get a pretty unbiased look at this subject. So I was interested, okay, are these true? Is it factual or whatever? And as I started digging into it, I was interested in knowing, okay, well, what's the makeup of the all-volunteer force? And I started digging into, with the help of Army recruiting commands and with Defense Department statistics, I was able to take a look at where we are with recruitment. And frankly, I was surprised. The first numbers I came across, I looked at the state of Texas and how many people volunteer for service from the state of Texas. knowing that Texas is a conservative state and population is second only to California, around 25 million. Then I looked at California to get some idea, because California has around 38 million people, figured, okay, they would have more people volunteering for service, right? Because they're a bigger state. And I found that it was about 1/10 of what Texas was volunteering. And so I've been stationed in California 3 times during my Navy career, and I know a little bit about their politics. And so I'm thinking, okay, there's something going on here. Maybe there's something else. So I start pulling this thread. And being from Massachusetts, I was interested, I enlisted from Massachusetts, and I was interested, well, how's Massachusetts stack up? And having grown up in Massachusetts, I understand a little bit about the politics of Massachusetts. And then I lived in Rhode Island, which is kind of a close cousin of Massachusetts in terms of its politics. And I looked at how they were doing at the same time. And as I did that, things seemed to come into focus a little bit. And I'll show you what I found in the next series of slides. If you've voted in the last 2 decades or so, these maps of the United States probably look pretty familiar. They're the electoral maps that are published every election cycle for the presidential election cycle. Blue states being the Democrat states and the red states being the Republican states. As I indicated, the trend that seemed to be coming up was that recruitment in blue states seemed to be worse than it was in red states. So I did a statistical study that you will not find anywhere else because it doesn't exist anywhere else. And it studies military recruits per 10,000 males in the population in each state. And as you see, the tendency, here's the median right here in the center, and that's marked by the state of Nevada, if anyone's interested, and that's around 11 or 12, nearly 12 men. And what you can see is that the red seems to be mostly to the right of the median, and blue seems to be mostly to the left. So this enabled me to talk to recruiters, and mainly in the Army Recruiting Command. Remember, the Army is about twice the size of the Navy and the Air Force, and so they have a more extensive recruiting network. And I spoke to fairly high up officers in most of their recruiting districts, and certainly in the ones that I had questions about. And they had never considered, they analyze a lot of things, ethnicity, gender, a lot of things, but not political affiliation or political ideology. And so what I was able to do is draw a correlation, a very strong correlation, between political ideology in the state from which the recruits come and recruitment. And that is not a very healthy thing for a democracy, especially a representative democracy or representative republic as we have. And has led me to conclude that we should return to a modified draft, kind of taking Congressman Rangel's recommendation, but for far different reasons. What I was able to determine is that there is not a problem with the elites that Kathy Roth Duquette talked about, and there's not a problem with racial makeup as Congressman Rangel would like to believe, but there is a problem regarding recruitment based on political ideology prevailing in the states that the recruits are coming from. We have overrepresentation from the red states and underrepresentation from the blue states. My recommendation is that we resort to a modified draft so that we bring this up to a more level plateau where we would have a lottery type draft in the blue states, and in some cases the red states that are underrepresented, to bring them up to an even level with the red states. In the case of the red states, you would not need to have a draft. You could continue on with the all-volunteer force, and that's why I say it's modified. We would only have draft in states that are underrepresented. And this is a pretty carefully construed thing having to do with proportional representation. After all, proportional representation is really the basis that we have in the Constitution for determining how many congressmen each state has, and it's based on population. And that's all I'm recommending here. I think it certainly the idea would pass the constitutional muster that some people would be concerned about. I think this is bodes poorly for our future if the trend continues, and there's every indication I have had since writing the book that the problem is becoming worse rather than better.